everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Duke Pod, where we talk about fun and exciting real estate stories that should give you guys lots of insight and tips about what you should be doing out there. So today, I'm going to talk about basically, the real estate market here in the GTA is like a tire fire. In one way, everything's going quick. Even the worst homes are having many offers on it. Us in the community, as realtors, all my friends in the community, we're all joking about it. If this is a really bad home, it's still going to have many offers on it, because the fact is that really nice homes are going for so much money now. Like, whatever it's listed for, let's say a nice home in Mississauga is listed for $800,000. It's a little townhouse or semi. It's probably going to get like 15, 20 offers. That's how crazy it is out there. So the whole point is it worth it to buy anything rather than buy nothing? So a lot of people will argue that, okay, I want this and this and this in a house. So either if the houses I'm looking at for my budget are just not, they don't have that, should I save money? Should I wait till a better house comes along? And let's give some examples of that. Let's talk about that. But before we get started, I want to mention that yesterday, January 10th, was my beautiful wife's birthday. So happy belated birthday to her. Of course, she knows that we had a cake and everything yesterday, so she's looking beautiful as always. So thank you for your support. Now let's get started. So let's talk about some things I've been thinking about in terms of this situation, right? So there's a report that in November of last year, 2020, for year to year, house prices are up about 23%. And then in December, I told you guys, I don't think there's a report out there of this yet, but I told a lot of you guys that I'm pretty sure the market, definitely sure the market took another step, 5 to 7%. So if you add those numbers together, if you had bought a home in, let's say November, December of 2019, that home today in January 2021, so a little bit more than a year later, is probably up about 30%. So if you bought a home for $500,000, that home is now worth $650,000. If you bought a home for $1 million, the home was worth $1.3 million. Holy cow, that's a lot of money in a year, right? So if you were a buyer and you're trying to get a home in this market, it's so hard, so hard. And me as a realtor helping a lot of buyers out there, it's also very, very hard. And I've had numerous buyers get priced out of markets, so they can't buy a certain city. And I've had buyers back out. So the question is it worth buying something rather than nothing? And when I'm talking about something, is it worth buying like something that's really not that good as opposed to something that is better or something that you want, right? And I think the answer is going to be yes. And I show you guys a few examples, okay? So, it's a funny joke yesterday. There's two things that made me think about this basically on Saturday, right? I saw a client. I showed them a few homes in Brampton, and this client reached out to me right after New Year's. Now, I haven't seen this client in 2020. Basically, in 2019, we met, and he said he wants to buy something. His job is a contract, so he could only qualify for a certain amount. But finally, his mom, after all of 2020, she agreed to go on board and co-sign with him. Now, that really sucks, because if she had agreed to co-sign with him in 2019, they would have made $150,000 minimum had they bought anything. But I saw him yesterday, and it's funny because this is the first time I've seen him in like a year and a half. And he used to have long hair, like ponytail, think of like Steven Seagal kind of look, if you guys know Steven Seagal. And I'm like, oh, you have a different look. And then when we finished up, I was like, when did you cut your hair? And he said, I cut it at the New Year's Eve of 2019, 2020. I thought about, I paused for a second, and I'm like, okay, well, did you cut your hair on New Year's Eve and be like, okay, 2020 is going to be my year? And he's like, yep. I had a really good laugh about that one. So the joke is great, but the point is that it's unfortunate that this person's parents couldn't co-sign earlier, and the fact is that that's really what's going to happen for a lot of people out there that are young professionals, they're not going to be able to afford these type of homes. They can go somewhere far, but it's still pretty expensive. Like if you go to like London, Ontario, those $200,000 homes a few years ago are now going for like 500-600. It's madness everywhere. So parents need to co-sign, young professionals need to borrow money. And so this is kind of going to be a theme of our topic. Is it worth borrowing money to get something, even if it's just not that good of a home, but you can at least afford it? Put all your money together. And another thing that made me think about this topic was I had some tenants look at a home that had bought for a client. I'm trying to get it leased out for them. And one tenant came in and they looked like a pretty good tenant, and they were talking about buying a home, how expensive it is, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, okay, we'll rent for a couple years. And maybe I shouldn't have told them that they should buy something rather than nothing, even if it's not that good of a home, because they could have been great tenants. They haven't responded to me since I told them that. But we had a heart-to-heart conversation, even though I'm not their realtor. And I don't know if they have a realtor. It'd be great if they reached out to me, if they're not going to lease the place. But the point was, they were like, the market's crazy. And yeah, it's deflating as a buyer to try to compete against the house. But I do believe that the reality is that buying something, even stretching your budget, making it work, is going to pay dividends in the end. So here are some examples. Let's get started. Here we go. All right. First, let's talk about a client that bought something not even recently, but a few years ago. So this is more of a standard year-to-year kind of increase kind of story, right? So I had a client, she came to an open house. It was in Etobicoke, single Italian lady with a daughter, like a teenage daughter, and just goes to work, comes home, relaxes. So it's not a handy person, it's not an investor, nothing like that. And I started showing her homes because she was like, maybe I want to sell my home, buy something else. And then she told me, you know what, I think I can get a mortgage of a home of this price without selling my home. So we did the financing, and that was factual. She could buy a second home. And we started looking around, and what ended up happening is, although we were kind of between Brampton, like a semi in Brampton, or something in Etobicoke, because her budget really was very, very tight for Etobicoke at that time. This is maybe 2016, something like that. So, the prices are about half of what they were now, which sounds nuts, but that is what it is. And there was a house that was a townhouse very close to her that came out. It was on the market. We looked at it. Now, inside it was a 2-bedroom, 2-level. There wasn't a basement, but it's a freehold home. And it looked like a good investment. On the outside, this place looks bad. Like the roof was sloped. The home looks like it's going to fall down. And it was basically 4 townhouses, what we call row houses, basically. A specific type of house that is, had a rear lane in the back, so you have some parking and stuff. And so she bought this thing for like $405. What was kind of interesting in that situation, if I just mention the actual transaction, is that once she had agreed to waive her financing and home inspection, we signed the paperwork, we sent it off. She called me like the next morning, be like, no, I don't want the house, back out. And I was like, well, I already sent the paperwork, it's done, it's signed, like, I'm sorry. The only thing that we had left was a condition for an appraisal, and the appraiser came that day, and basically if he didn't appraise it for 405, there was a chance she can get out of it. But he appraised it for 405, and I'm like the deal is done. So yeah, so I think this is the type of client that was very apprehensive. And so anyways, so she bought the house and she rented it. After about a year, I talked to her a few times, but after about a year, it seemed like she was very stressed out. The tenant that she had ended up leaving, and the place needed some needed someone to be handy to fix a lot of stuff, because it did look pretty good on the inside. It just was like a 120-year-old home. So you had, cabinets, needed some screws here, this, that, and she wasn't a handy person. So after a year, she agreed to sell it. We ended up selling it for $475,000. right? So there's a net difference of 70,000 after a year. Maybe the commission cost was like 20K. There's a seller commission, buyer commission. She paid some land transfer tax, whatever. So she made $40,000, let's say, right? Every time I talk to this lady, she does not have a problem with buying that house, going through the stress of finding a tenant, trying to fix it up. Yeah, she had to do some extra work on the weekends. That's what owning investments is about. Like sometimes you gotta do some extra work. Like money doesn't just grow on trees, right? But she made $40,000 in 1 year. Now the person that bought the house ended up selling it the year after, also with me. So that's kind of like a pretty cool situation. And they sold it for over 500. Now I think the house is worth 600,000. So had she have just held on to the house for the 4 years, she would have made around 200,000 to this date. And this is the worst house you can buy in Etobicoke possible. So is it better? Was she better to have bought in that house even after holding it just for 1 year? Yes, she was, definitely. Now let's look at another situation where the house is just absolutely terrible inside. So I sold a house in 2014 to a lady that was a hoarder, and as soon as when I met her, she also came into my open house, and she was dressed in like church clothing, so she looked great, really presentable, lovely, wholesome lady. As soon as I walked in her house, there was a foot of garbage on all three levels: the basement, the main level, and upstairs. If I had to go back and sell the house again, I probably would have done it differently. But I think we had the townhouse for sale. It was close to square one, so it was a nice location, and the house had good bones, but it was just a mess, like an absolute disaster. So it actually looked pretty good on the outside, like any regular two-story townhouse in that area, but an absolute disaster on the inside. The people that bought it, they were clients. I think they were actually a lead call, and then one of my partners took it, and they came in, they bought it, and they negotiated like 30,000 off on the price. The house wasn't selling at that time; it was a much slower market, so they got it for like 440,000. Right? I'm sure they spent, let's say, $50,000 to get new floors, repaint the house, maybe get some new cabinets, whatever. I don't think you need to go crazy. It's just a townhouse. But let's say they spent $50,000, right? So they're around the $490,000 mark, right? And then they rented it again. So they're making rent on the place. Today, those townhouses are selling for $800,000, between 800 and 850. Let's say 800. So by holding on to the place for 5 years, they've made $300,000 easy. And let's put a little twist to it. If they had left the place in the same disastrous state it was in, never rented it, just held on to it, never touched it, and then sold it on the market today, they probably would have still made $300,000, because that still would have been the worst house in the market. But the worst house in the market has a minimum value in that area. So yes, obviously these were investors. They knew what they were doing. They decided to swallow the dirt that came with the house. When they did get the keys, most of the garbage was pretty much gone. So the place was just dirty. Dirty carpets, everything was dirty walls, but a fresh coat of paint, new floors, new kitchen, and pretty much a brand new place. Maybe change the toilets, whatever, right? Like we're not talking about stuff that's so expensive, right? So yeah, they made a lot of money. I want to talk about two other examples. One is the current market that we have, the 2020, 2021 market. Obviously, 2020 was a crazy year, but in terms of real estate, it's been a seller's market pretty much the whole way through, and it's still a seller's market today in the first couple weeks of 2021. So the best comparable market to that was back in 2017, which is about a 6-month period from November 2016 to about April, May in 2017, where everything was selling, multiple offers, things were nuts. I'm going to tell you two stories about this. The first one is from a client of mine, where he was looking for an investment. And, we were in that market. We were in the seller's market, and we lost a lot of houses. We lost like 7, 8 offers easily. People just going crazy. And the lifespan of a buyer like this who ends up becoming serious and buying something is they're always increasing their budget. They have to waive their conditions, blah blah blah. So they bought a house in Clarkson for like $730,000. Now I think I've talked about this client before, but let's put a different spin on it, right? Basically, they bought this house. They're able to rent it for a good price. Today, when I talked to them, they're happy with the house, right? But if they called me a year later in 2018 because the market had softened and they were like, I want to sell the house, they probably would not have made any money on the house because we had bought it at a high price, right? So this is relative to today because anything you're buying right now is going to be really high, much higher than something you've seen on them that sold 3 months ago, for example, and of the exact same quality. So they bought it at a high point, and a few months later, a year later, they wouldn't have made that much money because the market hadn't changed that much. Okay, so if they did not sell, which they did not in 2018, and they didn't sell in 2019, now the market just went up 30%. So that $730,000 townhouse is probably worth $900,000 now. So all they had to do is sit and wait. I think they're making a little bit of money, cash flow, by renting it because it's 2 units, maybe between $300 to $600 a month. So they're making money on renting it. Someone's paying off their mortgage, and now if they want to sell it, they made a lot of money. But I don't think they want to sell it because when I talk to them for Christmas, they want to buy another one. So that's how it works. And then my own example, I can tell you guys, is this is going to be different from all the others because back in, I think, 2015, I had bought a 3-story townhouse from Mattamy, got the keys 2015. And I sold it in 2016, around the fall. So I lived in it for a little bit more than a year. And what my wife and I had planned was that we were going to buy a detached home from the builder here in Milton, Ontario, which we live in now. This is one of the rooms. And we'll take some of the money we made from that sale, and then we'll move it to the minimum deposit amount for the builder. But because we made about $70,000 on that townhouse that I originally sold, we had a little bit of money left over, and we actually had just enough money for 20% down of another townhouse, a 2-story townhouse. And here's where, choices could be made, right? So the reality is that we bought a house from the builder. It'll be ready in 2017. We need a place to live for 1 year. We could just rent a house. Like any house we want, we could just rent because we already have a house, right? What we ended up doing is we started looking at homes. We put in a few offers. We lost a few, but finally we got a townhouse for about $490,000 in 2016. $490,000, right? It's actually a really nice house. One of my favorite homes. It was not too big, less than 1,500 square feet, but the layout was great, and the upstairs rooms were big, and it was new. It was it was 3 years old at the time. A 2-story, right? When the builder gave us a letter in 2017 that our house will be ready in 3 months, at that time, 1 year later after buying the house, the market had picked up so much that when we put our townhouse on the market, the same one we bought for $490,000, I listed it for $599,000 in 1 year later. We still had 16 offers on the place, and it sold for $690,000. Okay? By buying this house and putting all our remainder money in it, even I was like, I don't know about this house. Like, I gave my wife, I told her we should buy some of an apartment, whatever, and we didn't do that. We just bought a strictly modern townhouse. And a year later, we had sold it for $200,000 more in 1 year. Okay, guys? So the question is, all these examples show that in 2021, whether you're going to be paying premium money let's say the only thing you can afford is like 500,000 or 450, and you have to go to London, Ontario, or St. Catharines, or Niagara, or Welland, or any of the smaller cities, or north of Barrie or whatever. Is it worth it to put all your eggs in one basket and to buy it instead of renting, or buy it even though you don't even like the house that much? You're just stressed out and maybe miserable that the market is limiting so many options for you. The answer is yes. It's proven time and time and time again that you will make money on any house you buy, no matter how bad or how good it is. Of course, if it's good, then it's probably going to be good later too, right? I've had this happen numerous times where people buy a home, they're in competition, there's like 5, 6, 10 offers, and you get the home. Later on, 5 years later, you sell it, there's 4, 5, 6 offers on it at that time. Chances are it's going to be similar because it's a good home, especially if you renovate it, you improve it. Any investments, okay, any homes, they've made a ton of money for people. So even I know a colleague who they bought a house in Brampton like a few years, maybe like sometime this year at the beginning, where the market was like a seller's market, but it wasn't like as intense as it is now. And they've already made money on that house. They're not even living in it, they're renting it out. And the rent is covering all the expenses. So do what you guys got to do to get any house you can before you get priced out of another level of a type of house. And that's my advice to you guys. Take these examples to heart, that it is absolutely worth it buying something than nothing right away. All right, guys, have a wonderful week.